600 guests watched my husband's open palm crack across my face on our first wedding anniversary, and every single one of them laughed. I stood there with my cheek burning under crystal chandeliers, surrounded by people who had spent the entire evening calling me worthless, nameless, nothing. But what none of them knew, not my husband, not his father, not a single soul in that glittering ballroom, was that one phone call from me could bring their entire world crashing down. Before I tell you what happened next, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me your country in the comments. Now, let's begin. My name is Serafina Ashford. I'm 26 years old, and until that night, I had spent an entire year pretending to be nobody. I met Kieran Blackwell 2 years ago at a corporate office downtown. The morning light was cutting through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the open floor plan. I was new, quiet, head down, focused on proving myself through work rather than words. Kieran was the opposite. He moved through the office like he owned the air in it. Confident, magnetic, always surrounded by people who wanted to be near whatever energy he carried. One afternoon, he walked up to my desk, leaned against the edge with an easy smile, and asked me something completely ordinary, whether the printer on the 3rd floor actually worked or if everyone was just pretending it did. I laughed before I could stop myself. And that one small moment cracked open a door I hadn't even realized was closed. We started talking after that. Small things at first, quick comments passing in the hallway, shared eye rolls during long meetings. Then coffee breaks stretched into lunches, and lunches stretched into late evenings finishing reports side by side while the office emptied around us. With Kieran, there was no performance. No pressure. He didn't care about titles or backgrounds. He saw the version of me I had always wanted someone to see, just me, nothing else. Maybe that's why I made the decision I did. One evening, sitting on the rooftop of his apartment building with the city glowing below us, he asked about my family. I paused. The wind picked up, pulling strands of hair across my face. Then I said it, I don't really have anyone. My parents are gone. I've been on my own for years. The words came out smooth, not because they were true, but because I needed them to be. I didn't want him to see my last name and calculate what it was worth. I didn't want him to weigh my father's empire against my own heart. I just wanted him to choose me. Only me. And he did. His eyes softened that night in a way I'd never seen before. He reached over, took my hand, and said nothing, which said everything. From that day on, he became the man I had always hoped existed. Kind, steady, present. The kind of man who remembers what you said 3 weeks ago and brings it up just to show you he was listening. When he asked me to marry him 6 months later, I said yes before he finished the question. But here's the question that kept me awake at night: if someone only loves the version of you that you've shown them, is that love real, or is it just a beautiful lie you both agreed to believe? The wedding was small, rushed, and joyless, at least for his family. Kieran's parents, Victor and Constance Blackwell, had plans for their son. Big plans. They wanted him married into old money, a family with connections, influence, the kind of name that opens doors before you even knock. And to them, I was none of that. I was a ghost, no family photos on the mantle, no parents at the ceremony, no lineage to display. At first, they were subtle about it. Cold silences at dinner. A seat at the far end of the table. Constance looking through me like I was a window she didn't care to glance out of. But after the wedding, the subtlety burned away like morning fog. Victor was the worst. He was a tall man with a voice built for courtrooms and a temperament designed for control. He didn't hide his contempt, he displayed it, polished it, wore it like a badge. "You didn't bring much into this family, did you?" he said one evening at dinner, cutting his steak without looking up. Simple girl. Simple background. He chewed slowly, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. I smiled through it. I told myself it was temporary, that time would soften them, that eventually they would see me for who I truly was. Time did nothing of the sort. The comments grew bolder, sharper, more frequent. "You ruined my son's future. You brought nothing into this house. You are useless. Each word landed like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples never stopped. And the most painful part, the part that made me lie awake staring at the ceiling with tears sliding silently into my pillow, was Kieran's silence. At first, he simply didn't defend me. He'd look away, change the subject, pretend he hadn't heard. I held on to that like a lifeline. I told myself he just didn't want conflict. He was caught in the middle. One day, he would stand up for me. But then he changed. It happened slowly, like a tide pulling sand from under your feet. You don't notice until you're already sinking. He started laughing at their jokes. He stopped meeting my eyes after his father's insults. And one night, lying in bed beside me with his back turned, he said it, "Maybe they have a point, Sarah." Something inside me cracked that night. Not broke, cracked. The kind of damage you can still walk on, but you feel it with every step. A woman named Delia, the elderly housekeeper who had worked for the Blackwell family for over 20 years, was the only person in that house who treated me like a human being. She never said much, she wasn't the type. But she'd leave a cup of chamomile tea outside my bedroom door on the night she heard me crying. Once, while folding linens, she looked at me and said quietly, "Strong trees don't grow in easy soil, dear." She never mentioned it again, but I never forgot it either. When Kieran told me about the anniversary party, something flickered inside me again, a small, stubborn flame I hadn't been able to kill. A grand celebration. 600 guests. An enormous ballroom draped in gold and ivory. For the first time in months, his eyes lit up when he talked to me. His parents were warm, almost pleasant. They included me in decisions, flowers, seating arrangements, the menu. Constance even complimented my dress. I wanted so badly to believe it was real. The night arrived. The ballroom at the Grand Meridian was breathtaking, vaulted ceilings hung with crystal chandeliers that scattered light like falling stars, long tables draped in white linen, the scent of gardenias floating through the air. I stood near the center with a glass of champagne in my hand, watching Kieran move through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling, commanding the room the way he always did. His parents greeted guests with practiced elegance. No tension. No cold looks. No whispers. For one shimmering, fragile moment, I believed it. Maybe they had finally accepted me. But tell me, have you ever walked into a room and felt, deep in your bones, that something terrible was about to happen, even though everything on the surface looked perfect? Victor Blackwell rose from his seat. He picked up his champagne glass, and the room slowly fell silent. 600 pairs of eyes turned toward him. My heart began to pound, though I couldn't have told you why. He smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach his eyes. 1 year of this marriage, he announced, his voice rolling across the ballroom like distant thunder. A few people chuckled. I forced a smile. This night is very special for our family, he continued. I glanced at Kieran, but he wasn't looking at me. He was watching his father, waiting. That uneasy feeling turned to ice in my stomach. Victor turned directly toward me, his eyes locking onto mine with a precision that made my skin crawl. And also, he said, pausing for effect, a perfect moment to speak the truth. The room went dead silent. My fingers tightened around the champagne glass so hard I thought it might shatter. What truth? I asked softly. He laughed. A truth everyone here deserves to know. Then he said it. My son made the biggest mistake of his life. Gasps. Whispers. And that mistake, he lifted his hand and pointed directly at me, is standing right here. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at Kieran. He stood frozen. His jaw was tight, his eyes were fixed on the floor, and he said nothing. Absolutely nothing. My chest tightened so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I accepted her, Victor continued, pacing now, performing for his audience, thinking perhaps she might bring something, anything, into our lives. He looked me up and down with theatrical disgust. But she brought nothing. No family. No background. No value. And my son, he sighed like a man carrying the weight of the world. My son wasted his future on her. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. Then it grew louder. I could feel the heat of 600 stares burning into my skin. I couldn't stay silent. That's enough, I said quietly, stepping forward. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady, the steadiest it had been in a year. You don't have the right to speak about me like this. For one frozen second, the room held its breath. Then it came. A sharp, cracking sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling and silenced everything. My head snapped to the side. Pain exploded across my left cheek. When I turned back, Kieran was standing in front of me, his hand still raised, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. Don't you dare, he said through his teeth. I will not let you disrespect my father. My breath caught in my throat like a trapped bird. I'm done with this, he continued, his voice carrying across the silent room. I can't live like this anymore. I deserve better. Better. The same word his family had weaponized against me for an entire year. And in that moment, standing there with my cheek on fire and 600 people watching me like I was entertainment, everything became painfully, brutally clear. The warmth. The smiles. The sudden kindness before this party. None of it was real. This wasn't a celebration. It was an execution. Laughter swelled through the ballroom again. People leaning toward each other, whispering, some covering their mouths to hide their amusement. My ears rang. My face burned. But I didn't cry. Not there. Not for them. I stood still, breathing slowly, and wiped the single tear that had slipped down my cheek. Something inside me shifted, like a lock turning that had been rusted shut for years. 1 year of silence. 1 year of patience. 1 year of swallowing my own dignity. It ended right there. I reached for my phone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I dialed a number I hadn't called in over a year. It rang once. Twice. Then he answered. Dad, I said softly. A pause. Then his voice, calm, deep, and immediately alert. What happened? I looked around the room. At the people still laughing. At the man who had just struck me. Please come, I said. Silence. I'll be there. The call ended. Victor laughed again. Calling someone? He mocked, turning to the crowd with a theatrical shrug. Who exactly? You told us you had no one. More laughter. I said nothing. I lowered my phone and stood perfectly still. Minutes passed. The room returned to its noise, music, clinking glasses, voices carrying on as though nothing had happened. But I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I was, hands clasped in front of me, watching the doors. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain and the humiliation, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time, certainty. Now ask yourself this, what would you do if the person you sacrificed everything for turned an entire room against you, and the only weapon you had left was the truth you had been hiding all along? Then the doors opened. Not with a crash, with a quiet, heavy authority that made every head in the room turn. The laughter died like a candle blown out. The music felt distant, irrelevant. A man walked in. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit with a presence that pressed against the walls of the room. He wasn't smiling. His eyes scanned the crowd with a cold, searching precision until they found me. And then he walked forward. Not fast, not slow, with the steady, unhesitating stride of a man who had never in his life been afraid to enter a room. When he stopped in front of me, my chest tightened. Dad, I whispered. But 600 people heard it. Complete silence. Kieran froze. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like he'd been carved from chalk. No, he whispered, stepping backward. That's not possible. Victor scoffed. Why are you acting like that? Who is this man? Kieran's lips trembled. His voice came out broken, fractured. He's Maximilian Ashford. A ripple tore through the room like a stone thrown into glass. The founder and CEO of Ashford Industrial. The company that owned the building they were standing in. The company that signed Kieran's paychecks. Victor's confidence evaporated like steam. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Kieran looked between us, his eyes wild with disbelief. "Sir," his voice shook violently. Why is she calling you Dad?" My father didn't look at him. He was looking at me. Slowly, carefully, his gaze traced across my face. And then it stopped. On the red mark blazing across my left cheek. Everything changed in that instant. His jaw tightened like a vice. His hands clenched at his sides. For a terrifying second, it looked like 63 years of composure might shatter completely. "Who did this?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud. It was the kind of quiet that makes entire rooms go cold. No one answered. No one breathed. Victor tried to speak. This is just a misunderstanding, stop. One word. And Victor Blackwell, a man who had spent the entire evening performing his authority, went silent like a child. My father's gaze shifted slowly across the room, across every face that had been laughing 5 minutes ago. "The company you're so proud your son works for," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "is in her name. It has been since she turned 21. Dead silence. Kieran's face turned white. "But she never told me," he stammered. "No," my father replied, and there was something almost sorrowful in his voice. "She didn't. Because she wanted you to choose her." He paused, letting the weight of it land. "Not her money. Not her name. Her." Kieran looked at me now. His eyes weren't angry anymore. They were breaking apart, the way glass breaks when it's hit from the inside. "I didn't know," he said quickly, desperately. "I swear, I didn't, exactly," my father cut in, stepping closer. "You didn't know." His voice dropped lower. "And I told her. Before the wedding, I sat her down and told her, this man is not worthy of you. One day, he will show you exactly who he is." The room was suffocating. I felt tears fill my eyes, not from pain, but from the brutal, blinding weight of truth. "Dad," I whispered. "I understand now." My father turned back to Victor and Kieran, his expression carved from stone. "What you did tonight," he said slowly, deliberately, "you will answer for. Every last piece of it." He looked at Kieran directly. "Tomorrow morning, I want your resignation on my desk." A pause. "And the divorce papers will follow." Kieran lunged forward in panic. "Please, wait, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, please don't," his voice cracked and splintered. But I raised my hand, and he stopped. Not because of fear. Because of something worse, the realization that my gesture carried more authority than anything he had ever possessed. "No," I said calmly. My voice didn't waver. "You showed me exactly who you are." I let the silence hold for a moment, then looked across the room, at every face that had watched, laughed, whispered. "I gave you a year," I said. "A full year to see me for who I am. And you failed." I picked up my bag slowly. My father stood beside me, solid, unshakable, a wall between me and every person in that room who had tried to make me small. Delia stood near the kitchen entrance, watching. She pressed her hand to her heart and nodded once, a gesture so small only I could see it. I looked at Kieran one last time. The same man who had slapped me minutes ago. "The man who hit me tonight," I said quietly, "would never have raised his hand if he had known who I really was." His eyes dropped to the floor. Because he knew, we both knew, it was the most damning truth of all. It wasn't that he had hurt me. It was that he had only hurt me because he thought I was powerless. I turned and walked toward the doors. Step by step. My heels clicked against the marble in the silence. No laughter. No whispers. Only the thick, choking weight of 600 people's regret. And just before I reached the door, I stopped. I didn't turn around. "You didn't lose me tonight," I said, my voice carrying through the ballroom one final time. A pause. "You lost the only person who ever truly chose you." Then I walked out into the night air, and for the first time in a year, I could breathe. Because I wasn't broken. I was free.